Be the Talk, episode 251, featuring Madison Campbell. Welcome to Be the Talk. We go behind the talk 7 days a week for tips and techniques to help you change the world. I'm Nathan Eckel, and a talker myself. I'm interviewing others who change the world with their talk. You can too, even if you've never given a talk before. Let's get started with today's show. We are live with Madison Campbell. Madison, are you ready to talk?
Absolutely.
Madison Campbell is a serial entrepreneur, venture capital investor, and astro-epidemiologist. Madison Campbell, welcome to the talk.
Well, thank you.
My gosh, there was a lot there, and I said the word astro-epidemiologist correctly. Venture capital, serial entrepreneur. I love all this. Your title of your TEDx Lincoln Square talk is called Viruses in Space, Cancer at Home. And this is stuff I've never thought about before. You mentioned this is not Star Trek. This is more like Columbus, the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria. And you go in depth on all the reasons why that is so. So please, Madison, take us behind your talk.
Yeah, so essentially, about 2 years ago, whenever Elon Musk had this conversation with a bunch of people saying, hey, we're going to start sending people to Mars, I became very interested because of my background in epidemiology to ask questions that maybe he wasn't thinking about asking. And some of those questions revolved around, okay, if we're going to send people to Mars and it's going to be 3 years long, what kind of health problems are there going to be? And that's kind of what led me into my research, that led me into the talk. And a lot of these space agencies, both commercial and government, are kind of not thinking about these problems yet. Obviously, it's very futuristic, but I really believe that they should be at the forefront of the conversations we're having going to space.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And so you talk about, and I'm slipping on the name, but we have a case study. We have someone who's been out in outer space for 6 months, a year and a half.
He's been out there for a year, Scott Kelly.
Yep. And then you go into all of the things that he's had to deal with since returning to Earth. So briefly, let us know this, because this perfectly illustrates your point. It truly is an idea worth spreading, because we have to have a reasonable expectation paradigm. So talk about what Scott's dealt with.
Yeah, so Scott Kelly was picked because not only was he astronaut ready, but he had a twin brother. And that's really, really important in science studies, because you can say, hey,
split test, A-B. Yeah.
A-B testing, right? And so essentially when he came back, he had, a lot of problems with bone degradation. So his bones just weren't working, as they normally would. He had problems with, cancer-like symptoms. He had nausea. He had problems with his eyes, like glaucoma-like symptoms. Just, like everything that could possibly go wrong, like the worst flu you could ever imagine kind of hit Scott Kelly when he came. And a lot of those symptoms went away, and a lot of those symptoms are kind of here to stay. And so, the things where, oh, I'm so tired, I'm sluggish, I have fatigue, those go away in 6 months. But those cancer symptoms that are kind of inside of you, those are just going to continue to grow because of his basically being in space and being exposed to radiation.
Well, and you mentioned he was exposed to like Incredible Hulk levels of radiation. That's a little bit of a 70s reference that not everybody's gonna follow that. But I remember what happened to the Incredible Hulk, and I'm being a little bit facetious here, but it's really not funny, and it's quite serious. So how many times the average human was he exposed to up there? You mentioned it in your talk.
It's about 30 times the average human. So it's like, I like to say like Hiroshima, Nagasaki, Chernobyl. Are you going to get on a bus trip and go to Chernobyl and walk around and be like, hey, this is great. This is awesome. Sign me up. That's essentially what Scott Kelly said. And, that's essentially what I'm trying to get through to people, is that it's not, this amazing trip to the moon where it's just like, woo, la-di-da-di-da, we're here. It's, actually a trip, in a school bus that has no protection to Chernobyl and just kind of touring around.
Now, Talk Universe, I don't know if you are a geek and you watch these Netflix documentaries like I do about how they just opened up the containment zone around Chernobyl like 30 years after it happened, but you get suited up. And you can still only go in there for like an hour, and then you have to go out, and there's wildlife and stuff that somehow have adapted. But this is serious, serious stuff. And Madison she lays it all out in this talk. Back to you, Madison.
Yeah, I mean, it's very serious, and we've been able to protect against radiation to an extent, but not to the extent where we're not going to be getting those levels. It's called galactic cosmic radiation. And it's basically this radiation that we just can't get rid of. We haven't figured it out yet. And so that's the type of stuff that I'm really interested in, because we're saying, hey, like, we can't get rid of this. We don't know what to do with this. Our technology is not there yet. You know, and that's kind of the stuff I'm worried about is, you know, where engineering and medical kind of comes together and says, hey, like, we know this is going to cause cancer, but we don't have anything to shield. What do we do?
Well, and what I'm thinking about right now is, I mean, we're finally maybe, okay, really trying to qualify this. Maybe we have enough awareness, whether you believe, you know, climate change and all of these things that are generally accepted right now. You know, wherever you stand on that, at least we have enough awareness that there is a big sustainability problem. We're starting to maybe start designing 20 years in the future to try to correct some of these things. But when you're talking about, you know, in your talk, going out there in space for even 3 months, 6 months is such a exponentially higher level of stuff we've never ever encountered before. So I hope that as a result of spreading your ideas, the people that are involved in sustainability down here on the earth, design thinking, systems thinking, and just every one of us can have that kind of awareness of let's clean up our own planet and clean up our consumption so that we don't have to hurry out there before we're ready to. Because it's not beam me up Scotty. It's like being in a microwave oven or a Chernobyl or something like that without a suit, as you say. Back to you.
Yeah. I mean, I think of my TED Talk as a glorified resume for SpaceX. So, you know, I'm like, hey, let me in. Let me try to help you, or, you know, or something like that. But, it's something that we should be paying more attention to. But the problem is that we're so worried about fixing the engineering problems of how do we get this up there and how do we get this there and back, that, you know, we're not thinking about the full picture, which to an extent, I'm like, I agree. Yeah. I mean, definitely the ship has to be able to go to Mars and come back in order for us to, you know, be able to make this happen. But at the same time, who's going to be driving the ship? It's not robots, it's humans. So let's kind of think from a human perspective, what could possibly happen?
So I'm going to open up a new can of worms just because we have another minute or two before the Blitz round. This is a fun conversation here today. You know, I'm just going to open up the can of worms of the social dynamics of being on a space. I mean, obviously people have done this for a week at a time, 2 weeks, a month, maybe a year at a time on the space station.
Yeah.
But I mean, you know, imagine having a really, really awful roommate and being a really awful roommate, and you can't escape and you can't get away for like the next year, and they don't even speak your language. What are some of the social dynamics that you might be aware of, the challenges, so that if we solved everything else and made it completely perfectly, you know, safe, oxygen, you know, nitrogen, everything all figured out, sustainable, we'd still have other people that we'd have to deal with, hundreds of thousands of other people eventually.
Well, this was actually a question that I thought about before I thought about my EBV stuff, because like you were saying, I was like, I think we could fix viruses, but like social stuff is really, really difficult. So I actually call it participant purgatory. So when you're in purgatory with people that you can't get out, and you're not there and you're not back. And so I compare it to being in a jail cell, right? And so the way that I kind of looked at it to create like a case study, I was like, how do people feel when they're in jail, you know, and together for a long amount of time, or in solitary confinement, or even in like Antarctica when they send people out there and there's nothing around. And so there's this really good story that actually NASA wrote about in one of their briefs. And it was a long time ago, where they talked about the problems of solitary confinement. And it talks about these two Russian men who are in Antarctica, and they're stationed there, and they can't move and they can't leave. And all they have is chess, right? To play chess. And so the story goes.
That sounds like purgatory, just a giant 2-year game of chess.
Yeah. And so knowing Russians, right? They're playing chess, and this is 6 months into it. And they're playing, and one person loses, and he's just like, I'm fed up. I can't lose anymore. I can't do this. And actually takes a saw off the wall and cuts the other person's head. And that's like the story that I like to off.
Is this a made up story, or did this actually happen?
This actually happened.
Oh no.
Alice in Wonderland off with their head.
Oh no.
I could not stand. So
that's not very tolerant. You chop the loser's head off on the chess game.
Yeah, so I like to talk about that with obviously worst case scenario of solitary confinement, because think of it. 6 months, you're alone with somebody, you hate them, and maybe you're playing, a rudimentary game of chess, and eventually you get fed up because the king beat, the queen, and this and that happened, and you're like, damn, I'm just gonna chop your head off. I'm done.
Right. We've been enjoying this conversation. I'm gonna pivot over on that note so that we don't get any farther. This is new territory on so many levels on BeTheTalk. We've been enjoying this talk with Madison Campbell about all kinds of things, including unfortunate winning, losing, decapitation, et cetera, in outer space or Antarctica, as the case may be. Madison gave a great TEDx Lincoln Square talk. It's called Viruses in Space, Cancer at Home. And we're going to hear more about her journey preparing and performing on the stage in just a moment on the Blitz Round. People ask, how could I start a 7-day-a-week podcast? It's because of what I've learned from my mentors. Some of the best mentors in history aren't around anymore. They've left hours of one-on-one mentoring behind in their books. Each month at Classics on Tap, I record a new chapter from a classic business book to help you make a difference. Download your first chapter at classicsontap.com. And we're back with the Blitz Round. We are talking to Madison Campbell. I'm going to ask her a series of either-or questions related to the preparation and performance of her TEDx Lincoln Square talk. Madison, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Were you invited or did you apply?
I talked to Trisha Brooke randomly, and she invited me.
All right. Congratulations. Are you, and you already answered this earlier, I don't remember if I was taping or not, but memorizer, improviser, or blender?
Blender. I had a structure, but I really didn't follow it at all.
Okay. I thought you were going to be pure improviser based on what you said. So good for you. So did that serve you a little bit of guidance and structure? Yeah.
I knew what bullet points I wanted to hit. And then I kind of switched the bullet points around, while I was in the talk, because I kind of surveyed the audience, and I'm like, let me try to tell this joke right now. And let me try to go here. And I think that's kind of really what you should do with audience, is just kind of survey what are they going to expect and what do they want. So you walk out on stage. Did you have nerves? Were you in the zone? Neither or both? I had nerves, but I was totally in the zone. In the front row were really, really great people who seemed really engaged with the topic that kind of got me on speed. What's a tip, tool, or technique that helped you prepare? Pick one spot and look at it. And if you can't pick one spot and look at it, really just talk to people. Talk to them like you're having a conversation with 5 people, the 5 people you can see that's not blocked out by the light, and make your conversation about that. Madison, were you a opener, were you a closer, or were you in between? I was in between. I was the second person in the second act. Any advice for the other in-betweeners out there? Yeah, I think get to know the people that go on right before you, kind of know their talk, know their beginning, middle, and end, so you can start preparing yourself. Because if you don't know when you're exactly going to go on and how long the talk is right before you, you get really nervous. Yeah. And that's a shout out for future organizers out there. Try to have that dress rehearsal. Try to, even if you don't have the time or the access to the building or whatever, try to give people a sense of where they fall so that they can start doing that in their mind or onboarding them in some other way. It doesn't always happen. So I'm glad it happened that way for you. Here's the cut for time question. What was the most painful part of your talk that you had to cut out? Basically the details of how gruesome it would be for people to go to space, I kind of wanted to make it family friendly. But I really wanted to talk about what the real problems are. But, it's TEDx. Let's kind of be family friendly here.
Well, now we know what you're capable of. What kind of gruesome stories lurk in the research of Madison Campbell? We've been enjoying this talk with Madison Campbell. Her talk is called Viruses in Space. Cancer at Home. You can go to BeTheTalk.com and watch that talk. You're going to hear some things that you might not have ever heard before. You can also connect with Madison Campbell on her LinkedIn page, and we'll have a link to that as well. And we'll be back with Madison Campbell in just a moment for the final word of advice. Everyone wants to change the world, but not everyone knows the first step. Before you can change the world with your talk, it has to be selected. So grab the templates, timelines, and tools that I use to get my talk selected at BeTheTalk.com. And we're back. It's time for the final word of advice with Madison Campbell.
Okay, so final word of advice. I think have something that you're passionate about and speak with passion. So when you're thinking about, should I do a TED Talk? Should I apply to do a TED Talk? Or maybe I've been invited. Really, when you're writing your speech, lead with passion. And if you lead with passion, everything else comes, right? And so if you love your topic and you want other people to love your topic, start by really, really expressing your love to other people. Then when you get on stage, it'll be so easy.
Madison Campbell, thanks so much for coming on the talk today and sharing your wisdom with Talk Universe.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Be The Talk. For tips and resources to help you change the world, go to BeTheTalk.com. See you tomorrow.